I'm a chronic pain researcher and a chronic pain patient. And in my 13 years of chronic pain, the one thing that has given me the most relief is cannabis. And I I'll be damned if I want to hide from that anymore. I have worked hard to be the faculty that I am and the advocate that I am for cannabis and for exercise in cannabis, and to shy away from that now, I'm in too deep.
What are you talking about?
Smoking it in a bong or a blunt.
Grass.
Blank.
Reefer.
Fast his job it just means like pass the fucking joint.
Ganja.
Hash.
Fucking awesome.
Hello and welcome back to Exploring Cannabis and Exercise, the podcast where the anecdotes meet the data. This week I'm talking with Dr. J. Derek Kingsley, a professor at Kent State University in Ohio. We recorded this right after Ohioans voted to approve recreational cannabis in the state, so congratulations, Ohio. We talk about his experience of being a chronic pain researcher to becoming a chronic pain patient himself after a gnarly injury and using medical cannabis to manage his pain. You'll hear the acronym IRB throughout the episode, which I think I've said in other episodes as well, but I just wanted to kind of take some time to talk about it a little bit. The IRB stands for the Institutional Review Board. This is a group of researchers and community members who review research before it is conducted to make sure it's ethical and safe for human subjects research. There are always some risks involved in having people do a study, from loss of confidentiality to loss of life. So you have to show that the benefits outweigh the risks and that any risks have been mitigated. If you see a flyer to participate in a study, when you go to the lab on the first day before you do anything else, the researcher will go through the study protocol, called the informed consent, and review the risks and benefits to you. Importantly, you always have the ability to withdraw at any time, even if you agreed and signed on to the study. If you'd like to participate in Dr. Kingsley's current survey research, make sure you click on the link in the episode notes. Make good choices out there. Enjoy. All right. Hello, Dr. Kingsley. I am so excited to talk to you today about cannabis and exercise, and we are both excited about cannabis and exercise research and love talking about exercise and cannabis research. So you are a currently associate professor, but soon to be full professor of kinesiology, exercise science, exercise physiology.
Exercise science and exercise physiology is our program. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
We not kinesiologists. We don't do anything motor, I'm afraid.
That's okay. I can do all the motor things over here.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm talking to the wrong person about that.
You're at Kent State in Ohio, and I wanted to briefly say congratulations on getting cannabis passed last week.
Yep. 21 plus recreational law will be changed. We've been medicinal for 5 years. They said the law will take effect for recreational 21 plus users on December 7th. I think there will be some changes at the way they dispense it. Here in Ohio, we have the Ohio 10th. We sell in 1/10 of an ounce. Everything is pre-packaged. When you go buy, let's say you want to buy an ounce, that means you got to buy 10 individual packages.
Interesting.
I believe they do like maybe 2/10 in one package you might be able to get, but we cannot buy. Everything is dictated by the Ohio 10th. And that took me a little bit of figuring out like what is, it's 2.83 grams per 10th.
It's been a while since I've had to do that kind of math, but yeah, wow.
It took me like a good 6 months to figure that out. And if I wanted to buy, like a quarter, like how do I make that conversion, or a half an ounce, how do I make that conversion? It did take some time, but that is the Ohio way, is just make it difficult enough, I guess, is what the Ohio way is. But we did vote to pass recreational marijuana on Tuesday last week, so I cannot be too upset about that, right? It's a big step.
Right.
It's a big step.
What's the vibe around cannabis like in Ohio?
Well, we started off, I've had, for background purposes, my area of research has really been chronic pain. My master's and PhD really focused on treatments for individuals with chronic pain, primarily women with fibromyalgia. And what I really worked with, we did a lot of complementary and alternative medicine in women with fibromyalgia. It's really been my bread and butter. A lot of my work in my earlier career was focused on alternative modalities to treat chronic pain, chiropractic care, yoga, acupuncture, acupressure, low-level laser, and we resistance exercise. I think we did about 5 or 6 resistance exercise. That's my other area of expertise is resistance exercise. And then what I have done then is with all this information on chronic pain, this really helped me when I became a chronic pain patient about 13, 14 years ago. I slipped on the ice and landed on my shoulder blades, and I cracked 9 vertebral bodies, and I lost 7 discs in a millisecond. I lost about 2 inches of height. And being a chronic pain scientist, I had a lot of alternative methods that I tried. I wanted to stay away from the narcotics because those are too easy to kill the pain. And it didn't really do a whole lot of good. I think I was taking, when I got down to the meds, I think I was taking 5 or 6 different meds a day just to kind of get by because I hurt so damn bad. Cannabis here in the state of Ohio opened up medicinally about 5 years ago, and I think my card number is like number 2. But then I had to drive an hour and a half to get to the nearest dispensary. There were 4 in the state, and that was true for about the first year. And then they got closer. It was a 45-minute drive, and then it was a half-hour drive. Now it's a 6-minute walk to the nearest dispensary. There's one in our neighborhood at the top of the hill.
Oh my God.
Ohio opened up 77 new dispensaries this year that have now officially opened. I think that gives us 98 for the state. So here in Kent, which is 30,000 people, we have a dispensary here, and then we have one in 3 in Akron, about to have a 4th, and then 1 in Ravenna. So I think now I have 5 dispensaries all within 20 minutes. Wow. So the vibe here is really changing a lot. And again, we were medicinal 18 plus, and now we're recreational 21 plus. But I don't know what that means for card holding individuals, nor do I think the state knows what that means either. My understanding is that the law we passed has a 10% tax that currently, as a medical cannabis user with a card, I don't pay. But I'm hoping, as a cannabis user with a medical card, that I still don't pay that when it becomes recreational, because I don't really know what states do. I mean, some states have both medicinal and recreational, and they maintain them differently. But I know that has been washed out in some states. When I was in Denver for ACSM, I think 8 or 9 years ago, they had a separate room for people that had a medical card versus the recreational card. And then in Denver this year, that was no longer the case. Now they've combined it into one program, essentially. So I'm really curious to see how things open up here in Ohio. But yeah, the vibe is changing. But I mean, cannabis has been around so long, but the way people are using it, I think, is very different. I mean, certainly me as a chronic pain user, taking a bunch of meds, I was sleeping maybe 3 hours a night, and now I'm sleeping 6 to 7 with cannabis. And that's been really a game changer in my quality of life, much less my relationships with my wife and family.
Totally.
I had some traumatic issues. I mean, I cracked 9 vertebrae in an instant. It was really not good. Turns out I had a severe osteoporosis is what the diagnosis was.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
But I'm from North Carolina, and I started smoking at an early age. My high school was in the middle of a tobacco field. And so I was smoking pretty heavy about 13 or 14 years of age when cigarettes were like 70 cents a pack. When I was in college, my freshman, sophomore year, I think I was smoking probably 5 to 6 packs a day.
Wow.
Gross. I know. And then for some reason, I changed majors to exercise science on January 7th, 1997. I had to take a class that was, what are your goals in this class? And mine was to stop smoking. I can still hear the laughter today. It's one of my primary driving forces. I quit cold turkey that day. I went sober for the next 18 years, no alcohol, no cigarettes ever again. Exercise changed my life in many ways, and my job is to give that back to as many people as I can. And I think we're doing pretty well with that, all things considered. I mean, truly.
I think so too. I know. I mean, looking at your CV, you've done so much different types of research, and it's all been really well received. I mean, you're doing all kinds of really cool lab-based research. And so what got you into the realm of doing cannabis-based research?
Well, and then a lot of this was with my two areas, a lot of the resistance exercise work we've done, some of it has been ergogenic aid based. And then with my chronic pain and the passing of cannabis laws here regarding medicinal marijuana in the state of Ohio, my thought process was, I wonder if I could look at women with fibromyalgia and whether or not they're using cannabis. One of the reasons I got into my chronic pain work was my mother. My mother was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 1999. At that point in time, I told her I would sell my business. I was doing personal training. I would go back to school and do some fibromyalgia research. Currently, the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines for testing and prescription uses my work as the basis for their exercise prescription in that population.
Cool.
But when thinking about chronic pain, I know with our opioid crisis, I had all kinds of questions out there. And I went to our IRB, we spoke to our IRB, and our IRB was not ready for me to do anything in the lab. So we came up with a couple questionnaires. One of the questionnaires that we have now published this year was really looking at are individuals utilizing cannabis as a recovery modality? Because, we sent out our questionnaire, posted online. We had about 120, 130 responses. And majority, all those individuals were utilizing cannabis regularly and were exercising regularly. And most of them, I think 79% stated that they use cannabis after aerobic activity as a means to recover, and like 87 after resistance exercise as a means to recover. So we gave a talk that year at Midwest, cannabis as an ergogenic aid. We gave another talk this year at Midwest because if we look at what it means to define ergogenic, that means to increase exercise performance as well as to aid and speed recovery. I think if you look at the literature, there's no data that truly support cannabis as being beneficial for exercise performance. I haven't seen a lot of that. Right. But I have seen a lot of that suggests that, when we think about what cannabis does, its primary uses are pain and sleep. And these are two primary hallmarks of recovery from exercise. So we did that study, we got it published, and yes, people use cannabis as a means to recover from exercise, both aerobic and resistance. That kind of started us on a path.
All right, so we are back after a technical difficulty yesterday from rural internet connection. So I wanted to highlight a couple of things that stood out to me in the article that you and your students published. A bunch of students, right?
Yep. The lead author was Anthony Pizzone. He was one of my PhD students. He moved into another lab to finish out his dissertation, and then the other three on there: Emily Erb, Sarah Kearney, and Stacy Hum. All three of them did their dissertation under my tutelage.
Rad. And so one of the things that I was really excited to see in it that is not related to cannabis was actually just the fact that you talked about the participant characteristics in men, women, and non-binary. I think it's really cool to start seeing more non-binary and like trans inclusion in research, because that was one of the things that made me kind of not really like exercise physiology, being one of the few females in my physiology program, that like my male colleagues didn't understand why I was so upset about the ways that females were represented in the exercise physiology research. And then so I know that there was not even a little, like there's so little research on trans non-binary people. So I was really excited to see that non-binary was part of the.
And our lab has done a lot over the years with sex differences, and we really have focused on resistance exercise in relation to men versus women on cardiovascular modulation. But then we sat down and talked about it, and I was like, well, this is good and great. We can move with times, and the times right now are really, there are three sexes out there that I keep seeing on more and more things: men, women, and non-binary. We only had two non-binary in this particular study. And I think we're doing what we can to be as inclusive as we can. And that can sometimes result in challenge. I know our reviewers weren't happy about it, but we were able to work with the reviewer and talk about how we felt it was important. And the reviewer was like, I see your point, and signed off on it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I really wanted to highlight that. I think that's really important to see that in more exercise physiology stuff.
We work hard, right? We do. And the sex differences stuff, I think, is where we're missing, right? There's very little data out there on women and exercise, as you stated, on almost anything. I mean, they're truly a underserved minority population. And I think we can do a lot better. We're lucky enough that here at Kent State, our IRB does not allow us to focus on one sex or another. They've worked real hard over the past few years to make sure that all IRBs are inclusive, include both sexes. We can no longer do just men or just women based on the way our IRB has been structured because of some of the arguments that we've made and my colleagues.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was I think we talked about this when we talked yesterday about how people were using both CBD and THC for recovery. It seemed like the 93% of the sample said that they use CBD for recovery, and 7% said I'm not sure. Whereas the THC, does THC aid in your recovery? 87% said yes, and 13% said I'm not sure. But you said all of the participants felt that use of cannabis was low risk regarding health outcomes, and no participants answered no for either of the questions. And so it's big that people are reporting that they're using cannabis for a variety of reasons, but that no one's saying that cannabis doesn't help with recovery.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think when we looked at the literature, there wasn't a whole lot that had said that. I think that was kind of out of line with what we have seen in other manuscripts overall. And I thought that was a strength of ours. Is we also had nobody reporting negative side effects of using cannabis or CBD. And sometimes in literature, I don't see that either, right? You know, the paranoia we talk about with cannabis, and sometimes it's too much too soon. And with that particular study you're discussing, they were all regular cannabis users and have been using cannabis for some time. So I guess they were in the groove with cannabis. And there's something to be said about that, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I got real paranoid, I got real scared. Well, how much do you take? Oh, I just took 80 milligrams. Well, that's great for your first time. It's probably a wee bit
probably
much,
not
right?
A great idea. Exactly.
And again,
yeah.
I know we talked about, should we ask people how much they're dosing, but then again, the answer we figured that we would probably get there is I don't know.
Exactly, especially in like what you were saying about Ohio, and it's going to be a different kind of thing in Ohio compared to other places where, like when I was smoking weed in Indiana, I had no idea how much I was using. It's just who knows.
Who knows?
But now I have such a better idea because I'm in a regulated market.
Yeah. Times have changed, and I think again now, like, we can go to the dispensary and be like, I need this much percent THC in relation to this much CBD. I need this many milligrams over this many hours, and we can fine tune that. And that's completely crazy. But I always remind my colleagues and my family as a cannabis user that this for us certainly here is it's medicine. We've got to treat it like medicine. Certainly here in Ohio, but with the recreational, like I said, I have no idea how that's going to change. I mean, I'm really curious to find out. I really am, because I have no idea. And I do this for a living. I have no idea.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and I do see that you have some the negative effects. People did say like dehydrated or anxiety, and it was only really small ends, and so only like one or two people had any negative effects from both the CBD group and the THC group.
Yeah, that's my mistake. You're right. None of them had any health benefit or negative health aspects. That's what it was. But then a few mentioned dehydration and things like that, and that's not supported by the literature either.
And laughing uncontrollably.
Yeah.
which is just fun. I think at some point when we had our survey and we decided to have a question in there about, we didn't want to say negative experiences. We said unanticipated experiences.
And that's good language.
Yeah. And so that's why I was happy to have a psychology professor help me out with some of that language with the survey. But one of the things on there that I added later on was just got too high to be effective at exercise. It's not that I had like couch lock. It was like, maybe I just need less next time. I think that's a negative experience as well, or an unanticipated experience.
And I think that's completely true, right? And certainly if you're doing like resistance exercise, I mean, because then it is about form and breathing and technique. And then if you're too euphoric to know what's going on, then your technique goes to crap. Now you got a lower back injury, right? I mean, that's the reality, right? You got to keep things tight when you're doing that resistance exercise. With running, it's just one foot in front of the other. Sometimes talking to my student who's an ultra marathoner, she's like, well, I run to not have to think. And that's great. And sometimes that's where cannabis might come in handy.
Exactly. And that's where like the spinal cord control of movement just kind of can help out.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, kind of speaking of which, you have a cool table in here, which I'll probably turn into some kind of graphic for Instagram or something. But
Fabulous.
Table 3, exercise modalities being used by cannabis users based on rank. And so you have it organized into CBD users and then THC users. And it's similar to all the other surveys that we've done where people are using cannabis products for so many different types of exercise. So what stood out to you when you were looking at that data?
Well, and again, I think also the CBD and the THC, I mean, they were almost identical down to
Yeah.
like number 5, and then there was a flip.
Yep.
And we again, there's not a lot of literature on this. So when we were talking about what do we expect, our expectation was, I have no idea. And we had to roll the ball on a hypothesis because there was no data to support our conclusions, right? It was really going into the unknown, and we didn't know what to expect. Are people lifting stones? Sure. I mean, are people running stones? Sure. But what about like everything else? Hiking, pickleball, kayaking. I mean, yeah, people are using cannabis for everything as a recovery modality, right?
Yep.
And the other side effect of that, to be clear, was we look at how often they take it is 3 to 4 times a day, 7 days a week. And I know one of my doc students was like, well, that just means they're high all the time. And I was like, that may be true, but that's still, even knowing that means when they get done exercising, the first thing they do is try and get ahead of their pain, the discomfort. And then this is what we use cannabis for currently. So I think that just adds the body of knowledge about why do people use cannabis. And the answer there is, we always joke that people use it for everything, right? If you've ever seen some movie, right, what was that, Dave Chappelle, and we had the guy that liked to smoke and get high to enhance life, or the person liked to smoke and get high and use to study. And that's people use cannabis now for everything because it's ubiquitous. I mean, it really is. And we're no longer hiding behind locked doors and locked windows to talk about it and to use it. Again, case in point, in Denver at ACSM, we smelled it everywhere we went. It's like in Seattle at ACSM, it's just in the air, right? And here in Ohio, with it being medicinal, we're not allowed to consume it outdoor. But I know here in Kent City, they have decriminalized it within city limits. So now, like during events outside, we smell it everywhere, which it's just taking some getting used to. We've had some discussion with my family because I vape, but I vape outside, so my kids don't smell it very often. But
Yeah.
My daughter was like, "Oh my God, there's a skunk here," and I was like, "Actually, honey, that's just cannabis." And she's like, "Oh my God, they're using your meds in public?" Yes, honey, yes, they are. And
Yeah.
that in California is very different, right? People are kind of smoking everywhere, but that here we're still behind locked doors and windows regarding consumption. But that's not true where you are, right? Do people just walk around smoking?
I mean, I do, but maybe I've gotten a little bit too lax living where I live. You go out to the beach and you see someone smoking a bong at the beach, and it's like,
No way!
oh yeah,
Seriously?
oh yeah, for sure.
Like a 2-foot bong, or like a
like a proper bong, yeah, for
no
sure.
way! That's a whole different thing, right?
Absolutely. And it relates to something that I've talked with my colleagues across the university, especially from social work, where they talk a lot about set and setting, how that can influence the drug experience. Where if someone's in a place where they are behind locked doors and they're having to smoke and hide, it's going to influence the type of high you get versus just being able to be free with it, and you can feel better about it.
It's carefree, right? And again, I think the idea that you're pushing there is behind locked doors and locked windows makes you feel like you're doing something wrong,
Right.
and you're not willing to be open about it. And I know, as a cannabis scientist, I've been more open about it since we got our first publication out, because I know when I got my cannabis card, I expressed this to my dean. I was like, I do have a cannabis card, just for your aware. I know Kent State has a drug policy, but I need some medicine. I'm in pain all the time, and the narcotics aren't working. And he was like, do what you got to do. Just don't come to work high and don't smoke in front of your students. Oh, okay.
Done. Yeah,
but that's not asking too much, right? I mean, that's just
Exactly.
good taste.
Yep. Yeah, you know what? And actually, something that I think that we've talked about in other places is how our field is responding to the increase in people talking about cannabis and exercise. And our big national organization, the ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, seems to be kind of resistant to it.
but they're making headway. I want that on record, right? They're making headway.
Yes.
They had Jeff Conan. He gave a talk on the virtual 2021. It was the very first cannabis talk he had, an hour-long tutorial lecture, Cannabis 101. And then last year, they had the very first CBD cannabidiol session of posters. There were 7 of us. That was the inaugural CBD cannabidiol section. And that's great. That's movement, right? Yep. That's moving in the right direction. And again, we were in San Diego and then Denver, and I was like, how more apropos can you get?
Exactly. Yeah. What is the reception that you get when you talk to other exercise physiologists that you're like friends with along the way? And you say that you're out doing this cannabis stuff. What do people say now to you?
Surprising. That's a really good question. I would say the responses are mixed. Some of my individuals are very conservative, and their states are really conservative, and they look at me like I'm a moron, like you're associating your name with an illegal drug. And my comment to that is, it might be illegal in your state, but it is not in ours. So maybe I have more of a voice just because it's here. I mean, if I was in South Carolina or Georgia, where they're really, aren't necessarily cannabis friendly at this point in time, I know North Carolina's working on it. Would I be as open about it as I am now? I don't know. Because then you're back to that closed door, closed window talking about it like you're committing a crime to try and get some pain relief. And again, I'm a chronic pain researcher and a chronic pain patient. And in my 13 years of chronic pain, the one thing that has given me the most relief is cannabis. And I'll be damned if I want to hide from that anymore. I have worked hard to be the faculty that I am and the advocate that I am for cannabis and for exercise in cannabis, and to shy away from that now, I'm in too deep. Well, and I think we need advocates. I think we need people that aren't going to run away and hide and be scared to talk about it, because it's where we are as society. I think 39 states have cannabis in one form or another. I mean, that is an overwhelming majority. But the amount of data looking at these things in cannabis is negligible at best, and should have been collected 50 years ago. So it's really hard, because now people are like, well, you do study cannabis. Can you answer these 5 questions? And I'm like, oh, my goodness, there's no answer to these 5 questions because I have no data to pull from to answer these questions. So now they're giving me fodder for my next project, because literally I've read as much as I can out there, and there's just not a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about your dream research.
Yeah. I think my first research project would just get it approved and get going. I know a lot of institutions and IRBs are really, are beheld by federal regulation, not by state regulation, right? That's how the IRB functions. And cannabis at this point in time is scheduled as a level 1 drug. So a lot of IRBs are going to look at cannabis research as if they're going to look at you giving somebody heroin. It's the same scheduled drug. And I think, again, I know President Biden's working on changing that language, and I wish him the best of luck, but I know, it's going to be tough. I know about that. So I think, let's start. My dream project is
yes. Let's say that there's no restrictions on IRB. Other than just like, don't be, horribly unethical to your.
Well, I'm really curious to know. We talk about all these things that cannabis does, pain and sleep, and what I really want to do first and foremost is do some painful experience. I want to do the cold pressor test, right? The CPT. And the CPT, if you're unaware, is you put your hand in cold water. It's about 4C. The water is circulated. It keeps your hand cold. And you do that for 2 or 3 minutes. And again, the idea behind cannabis is that would not be as painful. And that's low-hanging fruit. Here's an edible. Let's wait 45 minutes. Let's do the CPT beforehand. And then after it kicks in, just to see, does it really truly alter pain? Because if it does, then I've got 5 other projects that are going to spring out of my head that are going to be like, yes, it did what we thought it did. But right now, this date and time, those data, something simple as that, do not exist.
Exactly.
But I think in terms of like the dream and what we want to do and unlimited budget, I have no idea what that means, But I think, again, if cannabis truly is recovery, then we can quantify that, right? Let's put them through a damaging protocol, right? I know in our lab, when we do high intensity exercise, I'm a big fan of the Wingate anaerobic test, and we actually do multiple Wingate anaerobic tests back to back to back.
Oh, that's so psychotic.
Yeah, well, and I've got at least one or two publications where we did 2 or 3 repeated wind gates with about a minute and a half between them as a module or um, this idealism of high intensity exercise. But that causes damage, I guarantee you.
And real quick, if anyone doesn't know what the Wingate test is, it's a 30-second bicycle.
Yep, bicycle ergometer. So it's you pedal as hard and as fast as you can, and then I drop on 7.5% of your body weight, and you go from doing 110 RPMs to doing like 30, and you got to do it for 30 seconds and maintain that. And the recovery time for that would probably be about 3 minutes because it's anaerobic exercise. We give about a minute, maybe two, to really try and make it more high intense. But what I would do then is can we induce pain, and then can cannabis be used to help reduce that pain? But then I want to measure the cannabis in your system. I know it's been postulated certainly that when we start to exercise, if we're a cannabis user, we start breaking down fat cells, that then cannabis or THC goes up in the bloodstream. And I think that's another question that I think 1 or 2 studies have suggested that. And I think that's another question, because one study came out and it was, well, THC went up when they did aerobic exercise because they moved intraocular metabolism, broke down fat. And so THC was released from those fat cells in the bloodstream. And I'm skeptical about that being true. So I'm curious to know. But to draw blood and to analyze blood, I mean, there's always a cost associated with that. But that would be a really smart step just to see like how much cannabis does it take to kill pain. And, even with CBD, right? I know a lot of studies out there, like what we see as a standard operating procedure for is about 300 milligrams of CBD oftentimes. And is that enough of a threshold? And does that get into your system enough to have an effect? And is it individualized? The answer to all that is maybe, and I have no idea.
Exactly. Yes. I think it's so important it's good to highlight the research that does exist. And that's why I have this podcast, is to get the research that is actually out there to supplement the existing anecdotes, because there's tons of anecdotes there.
Yep.
And so here is what the research actually is, but also to highlight there's a lot that we actually have no idea about. And I'm really happy that we're at this point right now where we get to dream about what does that next study look like, that we can start to fill in some of these gaps with our research.
Yeah, and I know I've been working on, there's a company in Cleveland that presses their own CBD. So I've been talking to them about, can you give me unlimited product so we can test some of the stuff in the research laboratory. I think the CBD stuff, I think that'll make our IRB a little bit happier versus me giving them THC without the psychotic effects. I think they still will have some concerns, but again, that's pretty low hanging fruit. And a lot of these low hanging fruit studies at this point in time just haven't been done. And again, that's regulatory, and that's initiative, and that's IRB, and that's funding. I mean, but times are changing, and I think we need to get some answers, because we always talk about pain and cannabis and sleep and cannabis, but the data are pretty mixed, because the data go back to 1976 up until today, and there's still only like 15 papers. I mean, it's
right.
It's
and the cannabis products that were being used in a lot of those studies are just so not representative of what's available to the public now. And so it's kind of inappropriate to even cite some of them.
But then again, those days we don't know. We might know, okay, they consumed 12-gram joint or 1-gram joint or whatever. We have no idea how much THC was in that or how much CBD was in that. But now with products, we can send it out for third-party testing and come back and tell you exactly what was in it, and then maintain that across multiple subjects and really have an idea that this much cannabis has this big of an effect, and the person that weighs this much is this size, yada yada yada. So now we can give some more specific idealisms and prescriptions for people. Well, if you weigh this much, you'll need this amount, those kinds of things. Because right now, the individual prescriptions do not exist because there's no data to support those conclusions.
Exactly.
And again, if somebody's a first-time cannabis user, the guideline is start slow and then eke your way up. But people don't necessarily know what that means. That's hard, right? That's hard. I mean, because there's so many options. I mean, if you go and buy, I was thinking about gummies, and they sell them in, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, like for a single gummy. And do people know what that means? And is
right. And then there's like CBD to THC ratio. Sometimes there's
exactly.
CBN, CBG, all these different things. And it's the wild, wild west out there.
It is. And like 30 terpenes. And I don't think we know what that does. We talk about indica is good for relaxation and the hybrid relaxation and sativa more energizing, but is that anecdotal? And I suspect it is. But I haven't seen any research that will convince me that sativa does this differently than indica doing this. And, I think that truly is an anecdotal idealism. But again, low hanging fruit. Well, let's get do some indica and then measure sleepiness, tiredness, fatigue, mental thought, get you some sativa and within subject's design and see the effects there. Because nobody knows. I mean,
Exactly.
Wild West is a really good
with the same percentage of THC, or sorry, like 25% THC with an indica strain versus a sativa strain, versus a limonene terpene versus an osamine terpene or whatever. And so, there's like the research is endless. So what research are you up to right now?
Well, right now we have 2 projects. Both are questionnaires, right? We're just trying to get some ideas about what we can do. One project from our last one that we spoke about just a moment ago was really looking, all those subjects were using cannabis and had been for a little bit of time. They were all physically active. And one of our projects now is looking at individuals that are physically active and just recovery modalities in general. And we're trying to really tease apart, are people using cannabis and other recovery modalities, and are those different recovery modalities from those that are using no cannabis? Because recovery, you got the hot tub, right? Compression garments, ice water bath, foam rolling, yoga, whatever else, or even supplements. I mean, that list of supplements for recovery is pretty large as well. So our question is, are the supplements and recovery modalities similar or different between cannabis users and non-cannabis users? Our hypothesis right now ideally revolves around the line that people that use cannabis are probably not doing a lot of the other modalities. They're probably relying on cannabis. But again, that's our shot in the dark. There's no data to support that conclusion. That's just what we're thinking.
Yeah. Can people participate in that study, or is that
right now, I do have a QR code and the online questionnaire. I think we have about 70 or 80 participants in the past, since it's been up for about 6-7 weeks. And I can share that with you, and we can see.
I'll
we
have
can
a
get a few more.
Yeah.
Because we're just trying to see. I mean, there's no data, and we're just trying to grab some thought processes. Our other project is one of my students is an ultra marathoner, and she collected her dissertation looking at heart rate variability before, during, and days after an ultra marathon. And the anecdote she tells is that she said she had a headache, and she asked people around her if they had any Tylenol or Advil, and nobody did, but everybody had cannabis. So we were like, well, maybe ultra marathoners are using cannabis before, during, or after the ultra marathon. But again, there's no data to support that conclusion. So we have another questionnaire that's specific for individuals that are participating in ultra marathons, looking at recovery modalities, nutritional strategies, recovery modalities, as well as supplements and cannabis, to see, are individuals doing ultra marathons using cannabis before, during, and as a means to recover. And I suspect if you're running 100 miles, some people are probably using cannabis. But sure. I'm not a runner, so I don't know. But 100 miles, I mean, that's a big
boring after a while.
Run.
Yeah.
For some people, I'm sure that's true. But for others, I mean, what's the record on the ultra? Like 12 or 13 hours to run 100 miles? That is ungodly insane. And then what do you do to recover from that? And how long does it take? I mean, are you foam rolling every day? Are you popping some cannabis and foam rolling? Again, there's no data to know what they do after they run 100 miles in general, much less in relation to cannabis and cannabis behaviors and cannabis habits. And we're just trying to get a better idea about what people are doing, so we can then fine tune some projects. I know my student's dissertation with the ultra marathon, I think she's writing a grant for another ultra marathon study, and we'll probably continue that line of research. But again, now, like, do we have to have cannabis as, if we're doing heart rate, like, does that now become exclusionary criteria? That's kind of the things we're pushing at. Like, how can we refine our data to make sure that we know who is doing what? We're looking at cardiovascular effects, and maybe cannabis should be used as a covariate. Again, these are things we don't know because we don't know who's using it.
Right, exactly. And speaking of like low hanging fruit, just having, if you're at a race and then you have a bunch of, what's the word I'm trying to find? Like they're splits.
Oh, watch. Yeah.
Everyone's paying attention to their splits. And so you could just have a group of people that are non-cannabis users and then other people who are cannabis users. What are your splits like? Are you splitting the same amount, or do you have an increase in performance, a decrease in performance? How does your heart rate change as a result of that? I mean,
It's
it's
endless.
so exciting to think about all
And
these
that
other.
applies not just to an ultra, but even to like a 5K or a 10K or a half or a whole or a try. I mean, again, the ability to quantify these things is fairly endless. And even with resistance training, like are you powerlifting stoned? Are you doing Olympic lifting stoned? And they're not testing you for THC, they're testing you for steroids and growth hormone.
Right.
And I'm assuming no, because something like an Olympic lift is going to require a lot of focus and it's much more of a coordinated lift than a squat, bench, or dead, which still requires a focus. And is being stoned there detrimental? Again, I can quantify that in the lab, right? I mean, that's not difficult. That's
Exactly.
not hard, right?
Yes.
1 RM and then give you cannabis and go do the 1 RM again, right? That is not a challenging thing to do. I can give you a placebo and do the 1 RM and double blind it, right? That's low hanging fruit. And right now, such a thing has not been done. It's crazy. We're wild, wild west, Whitney. I really like that because we are pioneers in so many ways because we're not asking hard questions, but we're asking questions that I think are pertinent and necessary because nobody's done it.
Exactly. Yep.
And I know I speak to my students that work at the Student Rec Center, and I ask them, do you feel that every shift you're at the Student Rec Center, there's at least one person there that's high? And the answer is, oh, God, I smell it everywhere I go in the rec center. But this day and age, right, you don't have to smoke marijuana, right? You can eat it. You can put a patch on, a sublingual, a lotion. I mean, just because you smell it doesn't mean they're high or not, right? Because it can come in multiple forms this day and age. I know my dispensary now has some preloaded vape oil, and it smells and tastes like peaches or strawberries or pineapple, right? Don't even know it's cannabis.
Oh my gosh. Ah, wow. All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share right now?
Well, I think it's important, this idea that we're pioneers. And I think we're doing some really quality work just because we don't have any answers to anything. And anything we do is adding to the body of knowledge. So you can get busy doing something too, people.
Yes. Yes.
Even on yourself, right? Are you going out and running? Try it with, try it without, see if there's a difference. There might not be.
Exactly. Yep. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll do another episode sometime next time you get your next research project out, and you're always welcome.
Yeah. I need to talk to my students because I know I don't convince them. And as a laboratory, we're clearly cannabis friendly. And I know some of my undergraduate students are like, am I going to get in trouble if I come to lab high? And I was like, no, because I'm pretty sure all my graduate students might be. Because I got cannabis posters on the wall. I got cannabis posters in the hall. I got cannabis in most of my GAs, and my graduate students have that on their CV. And I've asked some other students, and they're like, I cannot have cannabis on my CV. On my CV, I think that'd be really detrimental to me moving forward. And I'm like, it may or it may not. And if you're applying to small liberal arts schools, maybe. But this day and age, I mean, times are changing, right? And if you're not pushing the envelope, I mean, that's kind of what we do as scientists sometimes is we ask the hard questions. We do.
Yep, absolutely. We need
love this
more
stuff.
people to do this stuff, to do this work. There's room for all of us. As you've seen in a lot of the space meetings that we've had, people are doing all kinds of different things. We all have our own little niche, our own little window into exercise. And so, yeah, there's room for all of us.
There is.
Welcome.
Because nothing's been done, right? So join us.
Yes, yes.
If you want to help out, great. And if you want to take our surveys and questionnaires, that's great too. And if you don't like cannabis, then that's great too, right? I mean, there's something out there for everybody. There's no denying that. And there's a million ways to recover from exercise, right? And maybe cannabis is one of them. But again, like I spoke about earlier, ergogenic age is defined as improving performance or improving recovery. Cannabis is two things: are reductions in pain and improvements in sleep, and those are the hallmarks of recovery in any ergogenic age. So what we work on in our lab is making sure people understand that we feel collectively that cannabis can be listed as an ergogenic aid. That's our big push. That's our mantra that we live and breathe. And that's been our big area of focus and expertise. So thank you for this opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. I enjoy what I do for a living, and I certainly hope it shows.
Amazing. It absolutely shows.
My wife just says I'm obnoxious, and she's probably right, but I'm hyper excitable. I am. I love what I do for a living in the lab and the classroom. And in the classroom, I don't talk about cannabis as much. I mean, because, even as a tenured faculty, sometimes I know undergraduate students just aren't ready for me to start talking about it openly. And I might have a slide to show our data, looking at correlations, because I teach statistics and things like that. But I know if I start talking about our cannabis work, somebody in the room is going to get uncomfortable, and that's not what I want to make a student feel like, uncomfortable. So I still keep a hushed tone about in the classroom. In the research lab, we got cannabis leaves everywhere on the walls. I mean, that's who we are.
Yep. I know. I do the same thing. I think it's part of my Midwestern sensibility of I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable.
Well, I don't ever want a student to feel ostracized being in any classroom that I teach, right? I like to have a unified front, and my job is to make sure everybody feels comfortable and part of the group, and that's a real important aspect of my teaching. It is, because my class is big. It's like 70 to 90 people most years. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. Awesome.
Of course. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you don't miss an episode. And be a gem and leave a rating and review. I might read your reviews on a future episode, so have fun with it. If you'd like to be a guest, have any guest ideas, or have any questions about cannabis and exercise you'd like me to talk about on a later episode, send me a DM on Instagram at Exploring Cannabis and Exercise, or email me at cannabisandexercise@gmail.com. If you would like to become a sponsor, I would love to have ads from listeners of the show with shared values. So even if you're out there doing something not cannabis related, if you're out there making boutique lava lamps or something like that, hell yeah, I'm happy to get the word out about your products. I'm always down to talk about cannabis and exercise for a variety of audiences, so reach out if you want me to come talk to your organization or to your team. Or if you just want to be a good person and throw some money my way, you can Venmo me at Whitney-Ogle. Huge thank you to my cousin Haley Montowski, who helped me get this podcast off the ground and created that great intro music mashup you hear at the beginning of the episode. The music you hear throughout is called Bonfire Cauliflower, created by Isaac Joel. Make good choices out there and have a good one.